Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the large window. His hands were behind his back, and his face showed worry. It had been 3 years since humans were banned from fighting in space wars. 3 long years of sitting still while other alien races handled all the battles. The order came from the Galactic Peace Council. They said humans were too dangerous in war, too wild, too unpredictable. The alien races voted together to keep humans away from all fights. They said the galaxy would be safer this way. Jake remembered the day the decision was made. The tall, crystal-like Zephyrians spoke first. Their leader's voice sounded like wind chimes. Humans fight without thinking, the alien said. They break rules. They cause too much damage. The Korvac representatives agreed. These bug-like creatures shared one mind across their whole race. When one spoke, they all spoke together. Human warfare has no order, no logic. It brings chaos where there should be control. Even the Luminals, beings made of pure energy, supported the ban. Their spokesperson glowed brighter as it spoke. We have studied human military history. Their methods are too brutal, too emotional. Peace requires calm minds, not human passion. Admiral Lisa Kane had argued against the decision. She was the highest-ranking human officer in the galaxy. You're making a mistake, she told the council. Someday you'll need us again. But the vote was final. Humans could keep their own space systems, but they could not help in any galactic conflicts. The peace accords were signed, and human warships were ordered to stay homed out. Now Jake watched his crew perform daily drills that meant nothing. His ship, the Guardian, was one of the most powerful vessels ever built. But it sat in Earth's solar system like a caged animal. His weapons were cleaned and ready, but there was no enemy to fight. The communication system beeped. Jake's second-in-command, Lieutenant Amy Foster, looked up from her station. Sir, we're getting a message from the Outer Rim. Put it through. Jake said. The main screen flickered to life. A Zephyrian appeared, but this one looked different. Its crystal body was cracked and dim. Behind it, Jake could see smoke and fire. This is Commander Zeph 97, the alien said. Its voice shook with fear. Our fleet is under attack. We need help. The Devourers are here. Jake had heard whispers about the Devourers. They were a new threat from beyond the galaxy's edge. No one knew where they came from, but they destroyed everything in their path. We cannot assist you, Jake replied, though the words hurt to say. The peace accords forbid human military action outside our system. The Zephyrian's crystal body flickered with desperate light. They're not like anything we've faced before. They learn from our attacks. They copy our weapons. Our strategies don't work against them. The transmission cut to static. Jake stared at the empty screen. Around him, his crew was silent. They all wanted to help, but their hands were tied by laws they never wanted. Amy turned to Jake. Sir, we could accidentally lose course. Navigation. Errors happen. Jake almost smiled. His crew was thinking the same thing he was, but he shook his head. We have orders. We follow them. Days passed. More messages came from the Outer Rim. The Korvac hive worlds were falling. Their shared mind was being infected somehow. The Devourers were turning Korvac ships against each other. The Luminals fared no better. These energy beings found their power being absorbed by the enemy. The Devourers were using luminal energy to make their own weapons stronger. Admiral Kane called Jake to her office on Earth. The building was old, but well kept. Earth's military headquarters had been quiet for too long. The situation is getting worse, Kane told him. She showed him reports from across the galaxy. Red marks showed Devourer attacks. There were too many to count. The aliens are losing every battle, Kane continued. Their tactics are too predictable. The Devourers study their moves and counter them perfectly. Jake looked at the star map. Whole sectors were going dark. What do the aliens want us to do about it? Kane's expression was grim. Officially, nothing. The peace accords still stand. But unofficial messages are reaching us. Some aliens are starting to think they made a mistake. And what do you think? Admiral? Kane was quiet for a long moment. I think they never understood why human warfare worked so well. They saw our chaos and called it brutality. They saw our willingness to break rules and called it dangerous. But sometimes you need chaos to fight something that adapts to order. Jake nodded. He had fought in the last human war before the Accords. He remembered how human forces could change their plans in the middle of a battle, how they could do things that made no sense to computers or logical minds, but somehow worked. The aliens fought like machines. They made perfect plans and followed them exactly. But the Devourers were learning from those perfect plans. They were using alien logic against the aliens themselves. Are we going to do anything? Jake asked. Kane looked out her window at the Earth below. Not officially. But if some human ships happen to have nation problems, if some human soldiers happen to be vacationing in the Outer Rim, well, space is very big. Accidents happen. Jake understood. It was the beginning of something dangerous. If they broke the peace accords, humans might never be trusted again. But if they did nothing, there might not be a galaxy left to worry about. He left Kane's office with new orders hidden in his pocket. Officially, he was still banned from fighting. But unofficially, the war was about to change. The next morning, Jake told his crew they were going on a training mission. They would be practicing long-range navigation in empty space. No one asked questions when their course happened to head toward the Outer Rim. As the Guardian left Earth's solar system for the first time in 3 years, Jake wondered if they were already too late. The galaxy was burning, and the aliens who had banned humanity from war were learning why humans had been so good at it in the first place. But the lesson might cost everyone everything. Colonel Danny Wright sat in a dark room on a space station nobody talked about. The station floated in empty space between star systems, hidden from all government sensors. It was the perfect place for meetings that were not supposed to happen. Across from Danny sat a Korvac named Hive Singer 5. This was unusual because Korvacs usually only talk to other Korvacs. Their shared mind made them distrust outsiders. But desperate times made strange partnerships. My people are dying, Hive Singer 5 said. Its bug-like face showed emotions that Korvacs rarely shared with other races. The Devourers have infected 17 of our Hive ships. They turn our own thoughts against us. Danny leaned forward. He was a big man with scars on his hands from old battles. How many ships do you have left? 43. But they grow weaker each day. The infection spreads through our mind link. We may have to break the connection to save ourselves. This was serious. If the Korvacs broke their mind link, they would stop being Korvacs. They would become just individual bugs, lost and afraid. Danny's communication device buzzed. Lieutenant Amy Foster's voice came through clearly. Colonel, we have a problem. The Luminals just lost their home system. Amy was on a different part of the station, coordinating with other alien refugees. She was young, but very smart about tactics. Before the peace accords, she had been one of the best strategic planners in the human fleet. How many survivors? Danny asked. Less than 1,000 energy beings. They're scattered across empty space. The Devourers drained most of their kind and used that energy to power new weapons. Hive Singer 5 made a clicking sound that meant distress in Korvac language. The Devourers learn too fast. Every weapon we use, they copy and improve. Every strategy we try, they turn against us. Danny stood up and walked to a wall screen. It showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking Devourer attacks. There were hundreds of red dots now. The alien fleets were losing everywhere. The problem is predictability, Danny said. Your people fight the same way every time. The Devourers study your patterns and counter them perfectly. And humans fight differently? Hive Singer 5 asked. Danny smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Humans don't follow patterns. We change our minds. We do stupid things that somehow work. We break our own rules when we need to. Sergeant Ben Clark entered the room carrying a small device. Ben was an expert with explosives and had fought in many human wars. His face was weathered, and his hands were steady from years of dangerous work. Got the intelligence report you wanted, Colonel, Ben said. He activated the device, and a hologram appeared showing a Devourer ship. Danny studied the image. The ship looked wrong somehow. It was made from pieces of other ships welded together in ways that should not work. They're building hybrid vessels. Gets worse, Ben said. He changed the image to show the inside of the ship. They're not just copying alien technology. They're copying alien crew members, too. The hologram showed creatures that looked like twisted versions of Zephyrians, Corvex, and Luminals. But their eyes were empty, and their movements were too smooth. They consume the crews and create copies, Ben explained. These copies have all the original memories and skills, but they serve the Devourers completely. Hive Singer 5's entire body shuddered. This is why we are losing. They know everything we know. They can predict everything we do. Amy's voice came through the communicator again. Colonel, Commander Steve Johnson, is reporting in from the Zephyrian colonies. Steve was another unofficial operative. He had been living among the Crystal people for 2 years, pretending to be a civilian trader. In reality, he was gathering intelligence and helping organize resistance cells. Put him through, Danny said. Steve's voice was filled with static from the long-range transmission. Danny, the situation here is bad. The Zephyrians have lost 60% of their fleet. But I've discovered something important. What is it? The Devourers have been studying human military history. They have records of every human battle for the past 300 years. They're preparing for us to join this war. Danny felt cold. They know we're coming? More than that. They're afraid of us. Every Devourer communication I've intercepted mentions humans as the primary threat. They started this war during the peace accords, specifically because they needed time to study us. Ben whistled low. Smart bugs. They knew the aliens couldn't beat them, but they weren't sure about us. Amy entered the room, her tablet showing new data. I've been analyzing the Devourer attack patterns. Steve is right. They always strike when human ships are confirmed to be far away. They avoid any system where humans might accidentally be present. Danny looked at the galaxy map again. The red dots were spreading, but they formed a pattern. The Devourers were moving in a circle around human space, getting closer, but never entering it. They're building up strength, Danny realized, learning from every battle with the aliens, getting ready for the real fight. Hive Singer 5 clicked nervously. If the Devourers fear humans so much, why did the Council ban you from warfare? Amy answered before Danny could speak. Because the aliens were afraid of us too. They just hid it better, Danny nodded. The aliens won wars through superior technology and numbers. Humans won wars through stubbornness and creativity. That made the aliens uncomfortable. They preferred enemies they could understand. But the Devourers are not like the aliens, Hive Singer 5 observed. They adapt. They evolve. Human creativity might not be enough. Ben placed his explosive device on the table. It was small but powerful enough to destroy a small ship. Maybe. But creativity isn't our only advantage. Humans are willing to do things that logical minds call impossible. Amy pulled up another display. It showed human military records from the old wars. Battle after battle, where humans had won against impossible odds through methods that made no strategic sense. Look at the Battle of Kepler Station, Amy said. Humans were outnumbered 50-1. Logic said they should surrender. Instead, they used their own reactors as weapons and took half the enemy fleet with them. Or the defense of Luna Colony, Ben added. 300 human soldiers held off 10,000 alien attackers for 6 months. They used mining equipment as weapons and turned the moon's low gravity into a tactical advantage. Danny studied the records. Every human victory had the same pattern. When traditional tactics failed, humans threw out the rulebook and tried something crazy. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But it always surprised the enemy. The Devourers think they're ready for us because they've studied our history, Danny said slowly. But history only shows what we did, not what we're willing to do. Steve's voice crackled through the communicator again. Danny, I'm getting reports that some alien commanders are starting to ask for human help. Quietly, off the record. What kind of help? Advisory positions. Technical consultation. Some are even offering to ignore the peace accords if humans can help them survive. Danny looked around the room. Ben was checking his weapons. Amy was calculating supply routes. Hive Singer 5 was transmitting to the remaining Korvuk hives. Everyone was getting ready for something that might destroy them all. The underground network is about to become very public, Annie said. Amy, contact all our cells. Tell them to prepare for open operations. Sir, if we break the peace accords openly, the Council will never trust humanity again. Danny looked at the galaxy map one more time. Half the red dots were new since yesterday. The Devourers were accelerating their attacks. Amy, if we don't break the peace accords, there won't be a Council left to worry about trust. He turned to Hive Singer 5. Tell your people we're coming. Tell them to hold on just a little longer. The Korvak's compound eyes gleamed with hope. For the first time in months. And if the other races object to human involvement? Danny smiled, and this time it was a real smile. Then they'll remember why they were afraid of us in the first place. General Paul Hayes walked through the empty corridors of Earth's military command center. His footsteps echoed in halls that used to be filled with officers planning battles across the galaxy. Now most rooms were dark, their computers shut down. Their strategic displays, showing nothing but local defense patterns. Paul had signed the peace accords 3 years ago. He told himself it was the right choice. The galaxy needed peace, and maybe humans were too aggressive for their own good. But lately, he wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The secure communication room was the only place still busy. Messages came in every hour from across the galaxy, all saying the same thing. The aliens were losing. The Devourers were spreading like a disease, consuming entire star systems. Paul's aide, Captain Julie Adams, met him at the door. She was young and eager, one of the few officers who still believed they might fight again someday. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her weapons clean and ready. General, priority message from Zephyrian High Command, Julie said. Paul frowned. The Crystal people rarely spoke to humans anymore. Not since the Accords banned human military involvement. Put it through. The hologram that appeared was barely recognizable as a Zephyrian. Its crystal body was cracked and dark. Parts of it were missing, as if something had eaten away the structure from inside. General Hayes, the alien said. Its voice was weak and filled with static. I am High Commander Crystal Song Alpha. I speak for what remains of my people. Paul had met Crystal Song Alpha before the peace accords. Back then, the Zephyrian had been tall and bright, its crystal body singing with harmonious light. Now it looked like a broken mirror. "Commander, how can we help you? Our homeworld has fallen. The Devourer fleet consumed it completely. We have 12 ships left from a fleet of 300. Our perfect strategies mean nothing against an enemy that learns faster than we can adapt." Paul felt sick. The Zephyrian homeworld had been one of the most beautiful places in the galaxy. Entire continents made of living crystal that sang in the wind. "We need sanctuary." Crystal Song Alpha continued. "But more than that, we need what we foolishly gave up. We need human military assistance. The peace accords. The peace accords are meaningless if there is no one left to keep peace with." The Zephyrian interrupted. "We were wrong. We all were wrong. The galaxy needs human warfare, not despite its chaos, but because of it." Paul looked at Julie. She was trying to hide her excitement, but he could see it in her eyes. The chance to fight again. The chance to use their training for something that mattered. "What exactly are you asking for?" "Anything you can spare. Ships, soldiers, weapons, tactics. The Devourers have studied every alien military doctrine for the past 1,000 years. But human methods remain unpredictable to them." The transmission ended abruptly. Paul stared at the empty hologram projector, thinking about choices and consequences. Julie spoke first. "Sir, we have to help them. The Council will never approve it. The other races still believe humans are too dangerous for galactic warfare. With respect, General, the other races are dying. Maybe it's time they remembered why they needed us in the first place." Paul made a decision that would change everything. "Julie, prepare a small strike force. Volunteers only. Make it look like a rescue mission for Zephyrian refugees. How small? 1 ship, 50 soldiers. Nothing that looks like a military invasion." Julie grinned. "I know just the ship for the job." 3 days later, Julie stood on the bridge of the frigate Resolute. It was not the biggest human warship, but it was fast and tough. The crew was made up of volunteers who had been waiting 3 years for this moment. Lieutenant Carl Stone was the youngest officer on the ship. He had graduated from the academy after the peace accords, so he had never seen real combat. But he was eager to prove himself and learn what his instructors had only taught him in theory. "Jump coordinates locked in," Carl reported. "We'll be in Devourer space in 10 minutes. Julie looked around the bridge. Every face showed the same expression. Nervous excitement mixed with determination. They were about to break laws that could get them all court-martialed. But they were also about to do what humans did best. "Remember," Julie told her crew, "this is officially a humanitarian rescue mission. We're looking for Zephyrian survivors and refugee ships. If we happen to encounter Devourer forces, we defend ourselves as necessary." The ship jumped to hyperspace. When they emerged, they found themselves in a system that had once been home to 50 million crystal beings. Now there was nothing but debris and the twisted remains of what used to be beautiful crystal cities. "Contact on sensors," Carl announced. "Large vessel, unknown configuration." The main screen showed something that made everyone on the bridge go quiet. It was clearly a Devourer ship, but it was made from pieces of destroyed Zephyrian vessels. Crystal formations had been melted and reshaped into weapons. The ship's hull was covered with symbols that hurt to look at. "They don't just destroy," Julie whispered. "They corrupt everything they touch." The Devourer ship turned toward them. It was 3 times larger than the Resolute, and armed with weapons that should not exist. Hybrid technology that combined the worst aspects of every alien civilization. "Incoming." "Transmission," Carl said. The face that appeared on screen looked like a Zephyrian, but its eyes were empty, and its crystal body pulsed with dark energy. "Human vessel," it said in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "You are in violation of the peace accords. Return to your territory immediately. Julie stood up straighter. We're on a rescue mission for survivors. We have clearance from Zephyrian High Command. Zephyrian High Command no longer exists. We have absorbed their knowledge and their authority. Leave now or be consumed. The transmission ended. Julie looked at her crew. This was the moment of choice. They could leave and report what they found, or they could do what humans did when faced with impossible odds. All hands, battle stations, Julie ordered. Carl's hands moved over his controls with surprising skill. Captain, their ship is much larger than ours. Their weapons are more advanced. Tactically, we should retreat. Carl, how long have you studied human military history? 4 years at the academy, ma'am. Then you know that humans don't fight. Tactically, we fight desperately. The Devourer ship fired first. Its weapons were precise and overwhelming, exactly what someone would expect from stolen alien technology. But Julie had ordered evasive maneuvers that made no sense to a logical. The Resolute spun and twisted through space like a drunk dancer. No computer could predict its movements because there was no pattern to predict. Carl was flying by instinct and fear, which made him completely unpredictable. Return fire, Julie ordered. Human weapons were not as advanced as alien technology, but they were reliable and adaptable. The Resolute's guns fired in patterns that confused the Devourer ship's defenses. Instead of concentrating firepower on weak points, they spread their shots randomly across the enemy hull. Their shields are adapting to our weapons, Carl reported, but slowly. They can't figure out our targeting system. That's because we don't have one, Julie replied. We're just shooting at whatever looks important. The battle lasted 20 minutes. By all logical measures, the Resolute should have been destroyed in the first 5 minutes. But logic had nothing to do with it. The human ship fought like a wild animal, unpredictable and desperate. When the Devourer ship finally exploded, Carl stared at his instruments in disbelief. How did we win? We didn't win, Julie said, looking at the damage reports. We survived. And that's usually enough. They found 6 Zephyrian ships hiding in the asteroid field around the system's dead star. The crystal beings were amazed that a single human frigate had destroyed a Devourer vessel. Your tactics make no sense, Crystal Song Alpha told Julie. When they met on the lead Zephyrian ship, your maneuvers violated every principle of space combat. That's why they worked, Julie explained. The Devourers have studied every alien military manual ever written. But human tactics aren't in any manual because they can't be written down. Why not? Julie smiled. Because we make them up as we go. On the journey back to human space, Carl asked Julie the question that had been bothering him since the battle. Captain, what if the Devourers learn from this fight? What if they adapt to our chaotic methods? Julie looked out at the stars. Somewhere, out there, the alien races were still dying while they waited for someone to save them. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were building more ships and consuming more worlds. Then we'll have to get more chaotic, she said. Lucky for the galaxy. Humans are very good at that. Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiant as it led the human fleet out of Earth's solar system. Behind her, 200 ships followed in formation. It was the largest human military force assembled since the peace accords. And every ship was crewed by volunteers. The alien survivors had begged for human help. The Galactic Peace Council was in chaos, with most of its members either dead or scattered. The careful laws that had kept humans away from galactic warfare meant nothing when there was no government left to enforce them. Admiral, Commander. Steve Johnson reported from his station. Long-range sensors are detecting massive Devourer activity in the Korvac home systems. At least 50 enemy vessels. Steve had returned from his undercover work among the aliens with intelligence that made everyone sick. The Devourers were not just winning the war. They were erasing entire civilizations from existence. Kane studied the tactical display. Red dots showed enemy positions across dozens of star systems. Each dot represented a ship built from the consumed remains of alien vessels and crews. "What's the status of our ground forces?" Kane asked. Colonel Danny Wright's voice came through the communication system from the troop transport ships. "All units ready for deployment, Admiral. We have 5,000 soldiers prepared for planetary assault operations." Kane nodded, but she felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Many of her best officers were old now, veterans of wars fought before the younger generation was born. The peace accords had created a gap in experience that might cost them everything. Lieutenant Carl Stone worked at the navigation station. He had been promoted quickly after his success in the first Devourer battle, but he was still learning what real war meant. His hands moved confidently over the controls, but Kane could see the tension in his shoulders. "Carl, what's our ETA to the first engagement zone?" 6 hours, Admiral. "The Korvac distress signals are getting weaker." Kane made her decision. "All ships, maximum speed. We're not going to be too late again." The fleet accelerated through hyperspace. When they emerged near the Korvac home system, they found a scene from nightmares. 3 planets were dark, their surfaces covered with the writhing mass of Devourer bioships that were consuming everything organic. "My God," Carl whispered. "There must be millions of them." The Korvac defenders were down to 12 ships, surrounded by more than 100 Devourer vessels. The bug-like aliens were fighting desperately, but their logical tactics were being countered by an enemy that had learned from every previous battle. "Open a channel to the Korvac fleet," Kane ordered. Face that appeared on screen was Hive Singer 5, the same Korvac that had been working with the human underground. Its compound eyes showed relief when it saw Kane. "Admiral Kane, we did not expect to see humans in this system." "The peace accords are suspended," Kane replied. "We're here to help." "The situation is desperate. The Devourers have infected our mind link. We can no longer coordinate our ships effectively. They turn our own thoughts against us." Kane looked at her tactical officer. "Steve, analysis of enemy positions?" Steve studied his instruments. "They're using perfect Korvac formation tactics against the Korvac ships. Every move the aliens make, the Devourers counter with their own strategies turned against them." "Then we don't use alien strategies," Kane said. "All ships prepare for human-style engagement. Random attack patterns, no predetermined formations, maximum chaos." The human fleet broke apart like an exploding star. Instead of maintaining the careful formations that alien races preferred, each ship chose its own target and attack method. It looked like complete disorder, but it was exactly what the Devourers could not predict. Captain Julie Adams led the frigate squadron in a diving attack that made no tactical sense. Her ships came at the enemy from above and below simultaneously, crossing their own firing lines in ways that should have resulted in friendly fire incidents. Lieutenant Carl Stone coordinated the capital ship bombardment, but instead of focusing on the largest targets, he ordered random fire patterns that hit whatever looked interesting at the moment. The Devourers, who had been winning through superior adaptation, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that had no patterns to adapt. Their bioships tried to counter human tactics, but there were no tactics to counter. "Enemy fleet is breaking formation," Steve reported. "They're trying to retreat to standard defensive positions. Don't let them reorganize," Kane ordered. "All ships press the attack. Stay random. Stay chaotic." The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, 60 Devourer ships had been destroyed, and the rest had fled the system. But the cost was heavy. 30 human vessels were damaged or destroyed, and hundreds of human lives were lost. Colonel Wright's ground forces had landed on the partially consumed Korvac homeworld. His report was grim. "Admiral, we've secured the remaining population centers, but the damage is extensive. The Devourers left biomines that turned the planet's own resources against us. Sergeant Ben Clark's demolition teams worked around the clock to clear the alien devices. But for every bomb they defused, 2 more appeared. The Devourers had learned to use the planet itself as a weapon. "Sir," Ben reported to Wright over the radio, "these devices are adapting to our removal techniques. They're learning from our methods in real time." Wright looked at the tactical map of the planet's surface. Red areas showed active Devourer contamination. The enemy was gone, but their influence remained like a cancer. "Then we stop using removal techniques," Wright decided. "All teams switch to complete destruction protocols. If we can't defuse them, we blow them up along with everything around them." It was a brutal solution, but it worked. The Devourers had programmed their devices to counter sophisticated disposal methods. They had not prepared for humans who would. Simply destroy everything and rebuild later. Back in space, Admiral Kane received a communication from the surviving Korvac leaders. Hive Singer 5 appeared on screen, but its appearance had changed. The infection in the mind link had forced the Korvacs to partially separate their consciousness, making them more individual than they had been in thousands of years. "Admiral, we owe you a debt that cannot be repaid," the Korvac said. "But we must warn you, the Devourers have learned from this battle. They have recorded every human tactic used here." Kane felt cold. How quickly do they adapt? Very quickly. The bioships that escaped will share their data with the entire Devourer network. Your chaos tactics may only work once. Steve looked up from his sensor station. "Admiral, incoming message from deep space. It's Commander Jake Morrison." Jake's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and worried. "Lisa, we have a problem. Long-range scouts report a massive Devourer fleet moving toward the last luminal colonies. At least 300 ships, and they're using new tactics." "What kind of tactics?" "Human tactics. They're flying in chaotic patterns, using random attack formations, even crossing their own firing lines. They learned from our victory here, and they're using it against the Luminals." Kane closed her eyes. This was what she had feared. An enemy that could adapt faster than humans could innovate. The Devourers were not just copying alien strategies anymore. They were copying human unpredictability itself. "Admiral," Carl said quietly, "if they can copy our chaos, how do we fight them?" Kane looked around her bridge. These people had volunteered to break galactic law to save alien races that had rejected them. They had fought impossible odds and won through stubbornness and creativity. But now the creativity was being used against the very people they were trying to save. "We get more chaotic," Kane said finally. "If they can copy our tactics, we'll have to do things so crazy that even we don't understand them." Steve shook his head. "Admiral, that's asking our people to act irrationally in battle. It could get them all killed." Kane looked at the star map showing Devourer positions across the galaxy. Every day they waited, more civilizations died. Every strategy they used was learned and turned against others. "Steve, our people are dying. Anyway, the question is whether they die following failed logic or successful insanity." She turned to the communication station. "Open a channel to all ships. It's time to remind the galaxy why the aliens were afraid of human warfare in the first place." The message went out across the fleet. Abandon all tactical doctrine. Ignore military training. Fight like humans had always fought when everything was at stake. Fight like their lives and the lives of everyone they cared about depended on doing. The impossible dot in the depths of space, the Devourer fleet received new data about human warfare. They began adapting their strategies to counter human chaos. But they made one critical error in their calculations. They assumed that human chaos had limits. They assumed it could be understood and copied. They had never encountered a species willing to sacrifice everything, including their own understanding of warfare, to protect others. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Lisa Kane stood before the largest fleet humanity had assembled in 50 years. Above the last free Korvac world, 300 human ships faced off against a devourer armada that blotted out the stars. The enemy had learned from every previous battle, copying human tactics and improving them with alien precision. The devourer fleet moved in patterns that looked chaotic, but were actually calculated chaos. They had studied human unpredictability and turned it into a science. Their bioships flew in random formations that were somehow more random than anything humans could create naturally. Admiral, Commander Steve Johnson reported, enemy vessels are using human tactical patterns from the last 6 engagements. They're even copying our communication protocols. Kane watched the tactical display with growing dread. The Devourers had done more than learn human warfare. They had perfected it. Their ships moved with all the unpredictability of human pilots, but none of the emotional limitations that sometimes held humans back. Lieutenant Carl Stone, now a veteran of a dozen battles, looked up from his station. Ma'am, they're not just copying our tactics. They're using them better than we do. The communication system crackled to life. A voice that sounded almost human came through, but there was something wrong with it. Too perfect. Too controlled. Admiral Kane, the voice said, this is the Devourer. Prime Intelligence. We wish to discuss terms of surrender. Kane almost laughed. We don't surrender. That's not how humans work. We have studied your species for 3 years. We know exactly how humans work. You fight with emotion instead of logic. You make sacrificial gestures that accomplish nothing. You waste resources on protecting the weak instead of preserving the strong. And that's why you're afraid of us. There was a pause before the voice responded. We are not afraid. We are prepared. We have learned to be more human than humans. The transmission ended. Kane looked around her bridge at the faces of people she had led through impossible battles. They were tired, scared, and outnumbered, but they were still here. All ships, Kane announced over the fleet communication channel, prepare for final engagement. This is what we trained for. But even as she said it, Kane knew that training meant nothing now. The Devourers had studied every human military manual, analyzed every battle, and perfected every tactic. Traditional warfare was useless against an enemy that could outhuman the humans. Deep in the ship, Colonel Danny Wright prepared his ground forces for what might be their last mission. The plan was simple and insane. They would board the primary Devourer vessel and plant explosives in its core. It was a suicide mission, but it might give the fleet a chance to win. Sergeant Ben Clark checked his demolition charges one last time. He had been blowing things up for 20 years, but this would be his masterpiece. One bomb big enough to destroy a ship the size of a small moon. Colonel, Ben said, the charges are ready. But getting close enough to plant them means flying through the entire enemy fleet. Wright nodded. I know. We'll need a distraction. Lieutenant Carl Stone had volunteered to pilot the assault shuttle. He was young enough to be crazy and experienced enough to maybe pull it off. Sir, I've calculated 17 different approach vectors. All of them end with us getting killed. Then we'll have to try the 18th, Wright replied. The battle began at dawn, ship time. The human fleet charged forward in what looked like a desperate final assault. Kane had ordered maximum aggression, knowing that the Devourers would expect it and counter it perfectly. But hidden among the attacking ships was something the Devourers had not anticipated. Captain Julie Adams led a squadron of civilian vessels that had volunteered for the mission. These were cargo ships, passenger liners, and mining craft crewed by people who had never fired a shot in anger. The civilian ships had no tactical training, no military discipline, and no idea what they were supposed to do. They flew straight at the enemy with all the grace of falling rocks. It was so disorganized that it confused even the humans. "What are those idiots doing?" Steve asked, watching the civilian ships scatter in all directions. "Being human," Kane replied. "The Devourers tried to counter the civilian attack, but their perfect human tactics meant nothing against people who had no tactics at all. The mining ships used industrial equipment as weapons. The passenger liners rammed enemy vessels at full speed. The cargo haulers exploded their own reactors to take out clusters of bio-ships in the chaos of the civilian assault. Carl's shuttle slipped through the enemy lines unnoticed. The Devourers were too busy trying to understand the random attacks to notice one small craft heading for their command ship. Wright's assault team reached the Devourer vessel and cut their way inside. What they found made them all go quiet. The ship was not built from consumed alien technology. It was grown from consumed alien bodies. The walls pulsed with what had once been Zephyrian crystal formations. The floors were made from processed Corvic chitin. The ceiling glowed with captured luminal energy. Thousands of alien beings had been dissolved and reformed into a living starship. "My God," Wright whispered. "They're not just copying us. They're trying to become us." Ben set his charges in the ship's central core, but what he found there made his hands shake. It was not a computer or engine. It was a brain. A massive organic brain made from the neural tissue of every species the Devourers had consumed. Brain spoke to them in a voice that sounded like every alien race at once. "You cannot stop us. We have become what you are. We understand sacrifice. We understand emotion. We understand humanity better than humans do." Wright looked at the brain. This creature that thought it had learned what it meant to be human by consuming the memories of dead aliens. "You understand the words, but you missed the meaning." "Explain." "Humans don't sacrifice for logic or strategy. We sacrifice because we care about others more than ourselves. You can copy our tactics, but you can never copy that." Ben activated the timer on his explosives. They had 60 seconds to get out, but the brain was not finished talking. "We have studied human emotion. We have analyzed human sacrifice. We have perfected human warfare. What do you have that we do not?" Wright smiled as he ran toward the escape pod. "The willingness to be wrong." The explosion tore the Devourer command ship apart from the inside. But more than that, it sent a signal through the bio-network that connected all Devourer vessels. For the first time, they experienced something they had never felt before. Fear, not calculated risk assessment or logical threat analysis. Pure emotional terror at the thought of their own destruction. The human brain patterns they had copied included not just tactical thinking, but human feelings. And human feelings included the fear of death. The Devourer fleet broke apart as individual ships began fleeing in panic. Their perfect coordination dissolved into chaos as each vessel tried to save itself. They had learned to think like humans, but they had also learned to feel like humans. Admiral Kane watched the enemy retreat and felt something she had not expected: sadness. The Devourers had been trying to understand humanity by consuming it, but they had learned the wrong lessons. "Admiral," Carl reported from his shuttle, "the survivors are asking for instructions. The civilian ships are requesting orders." Kane looked at the aftermath of the battle. Human ships were scattered across space, some destroyed, others badly damaged. The cost had been terrible, but they had won. "Tell them to go home," Kane said. "Tell them the war is over." "What about the remaining Devourer ships?" Kane thought about that. The enemy was broken and scattered, but they were still out there, still dangerous, still learning. The Devourers wanted to understand human warfare, Kane said. They learned that humans fight hardest when protecting others, but they never learned that humans also know when to stop fighting. The surviving alien races gathered above the Korvac homeworld for what would later be called the New Accords. But these were very different from the peace accords that had banned humans from warfare. Crystal Song Alpha spoke for the Zephyrians. Its crystal body was dim but recovering. We owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. But more than that, we owe an apology. Hive Singer 5 represented the Korvacs. The shared mind link had been partially restored, but the species was forever changed by their experience of individuality. We removed humans from warfare because we feared their methods. We did not understand that those methods came from their hearts, not their minds. The remaining Luminals sent their own representative, a being of soft light that spoke in harmonious tones. The galaxy has learned a painful lesson. Logic without emotion leads to stagnation. Emotion without logic leads to chaos. But emotion, guided by wisdom, leads to salvation. Admiral Kane stood before the assembled alien leaders and said the words that would reshape galactic civilization. The peace accords are dissolved, but humans will not return to warfare as conquerors. We fight only to protect. We lead only when asked. And we sacrifice only for those who cannot sacrifice for themselves. Years later, Lieutenant Carl Stone, now Admiral Stone, would train a new generation of officers from every species in the galaxy. Human, Zephyrian, Korvac, and Luminal cadets learned together that the strongest tactics came not from cold calculation, but from the willingness to risk everything for others. The alien races never again questioned why humans had been removed from battlefield.